Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Bhagwan Rajneesh, otherwise known as Osho? The story of Rajneesh was featured in a documentary called Wild Wild Country. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I will review the background of Rajneesh, then the timeline of various controversial incidents, and then offer my analysis. Rajneesh was born on December 11, 1931 in India. He was the eldest of 11 children. He lived with his maternal grandparents until his grandfather died when he was 7 years old. Apparently, his grandparents put no restrictions on him whatsoever. He described that time as carefree. After this, he went to live with his parents, but he was still haunted by his grandfather's death. A cousin and a love interest of his would die when he was 15 years old. These two losses led Rajneesh to become preoccupied with death. In school, he was considered intelligent and good at debating. He took an interest in yoga, the occult, hypnosis, meditation, and he rejected traditional religious beliefs. I wonder if his guidance counselor recommended a career as a cult leader. It seems like a good fit based on his interests. When he was 19 years old, he went to college, but he was so disruptive, they asked him to leave. He would transfer to another college, but again was involved in a lot of conflict. So essentially, the college offered him a deal. He only had to show up for tests. He did not have to attend classes. On March 21, 1953, Rajneesh became spiritually enlightened through a mystical experience he had while sitting under a tree. After earning a bachelor's degree in philosophy in 1955, he went on to earn a master's degree in philosophy in 1957. He accepted a teaching job at a college, but they declared him as a danger to his students' character, religion, and morality. So he was asked to transfer, I guess so he could be a danger somewhere else. He ended up at another university where he was promoted to professor in 1960. During this time, he was also traveling throughout India and telling people how socialism wasn't working out. He believed that capitalism and science were the keys to success. He was also critical of orthodox Indian religions. This had an interesting effect. Although many people did not like him, he attracted a small, loyal following who paid him money for spiritual advice. He was doing so well that he quit his job at the university in 1966. In 1970, he formed what many people consider a cult. The members were called neo-sannyasins. In 1971, he adopted the title Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. He continued traveling around India and giving speeches. By 1974, he had developed a number of illnesses, including asthma and diabetes, so traveling was becoming more difficult. He largely stayed at one location for many years. He established a religious community, and his activity there attracted many Westerners. The environment was described as emotionally charged, exciting, and intense. He formed his own version of group therapy that involved sexual encounters as well as physical aggression. A few people were injured. Drug use also became a problem. Disciples who graduated could take a job in the community. The work environment wasn't ideal. Everybody worked for free, and people with antagonistic personalities were selected as supervisors. Sounds like most corporate and academic jobs. I guess Rajneesh was a pioneer after all. By 1981, the community was hosting 30,000 visitors a year. Rajneesh started looking for a new location so he could expand, but he was having difficulty finding that in India. One of his followers was named Ma Anand Sheela. She would eventually become his second in command. Sheila's husband bought about 64,000 acres in Oregon, near the small town of Antelope. Rajneesh moved to the newly established community in August of 1981. In 1982, the commune was incorporated as the city of Rajneeshpuram. The commune was involved in a number of conflicts with local residents from the very beginning. The sannyasins were combative. Land use was a major source of complaints, like what buildings they were allowed to build, could they grow crops, were they redirecting water, what type of sewer system could they build, things like that. Many residents took legal actions against the sannyasins, including attempting to dissolve their incorporation. Residents also considered the sannyasins to be dangerous, immoral, destructive, a religious cult, and a threat to public safety. So I guess it's safe to say they didn't really make a good impression when they moved to Oregon. Rajneesh gave Ma Anand more power. She was actually given limited power of attorney initially, and then given full power of attorney later. Rajneesh stopped talking publicly and would primarily interact with the sannyasins through daily drive-bys in a Rolls-Royce. Rajneesh liked Rolls-Royces. Eventually he had 93 of them. I think the term drive-by has taken on a different connotation since the time of Rajneesh. He was not shooting bullets at his followers, rather mostly just waving. But if he had shot them, they would have joyously received those bullets. His followers were quite enthusiastic about these drive-bys, almost like if the Rolls-Royce ran over one of them, another one would jump out of the crowd and say, "Me next." In an effort to gain political control over the area, the sannyasins sent buses out to a number of major cities and collected homeless people to bring back to the commune. Their hope was to register the new homeless residents as voters, but when their plan failed, they simply abandoned the homeless people into the surrounding communities. So they just kicked them out. In October 1984, after some internal disputes among leadership, Rajneesh decided to start talking again publicly. In September 1985, Sheila and her entire management team unexpectedly left for Europe. Rajneesh held a press conference and accused Sheila of a number of crimes, including a bioterror attack using salmonella, wiretapping, the poisoning of public officials, and the attempted murder of his personal physician. He invited law enforcement to investigate. Perhaps Rajneesh had not been keeping up with the news. Law enforcement was not his friend, and they were eager to start investigating anything to do with the commune and the cult. The subsequent investigation did result in Sheila and several of her associates being convicted of various crimes, but it also allowed the authorities to collect evidence against Rajneesh. Rajneesh had formed the religion of Rajneeshism sometime around 1983 to avoid some immigration problems some of the sannyasins were having. In 1985, Rajneesh claimed that he was not a religious leader. He said Rajneeshism was a religionless religion. By this point, the U.S. authorities had really had enough of Rajneesh. Many believed that he was involved in the crimes for which Sheila was convicted, but they were having trouble finding a good deal of evidence to support that claim. In October 1985, a federal grand jury indicted Rajneesh for conspiracy to evade immigration laws using the little evidence that was available. Rajneesh and a few of his followers climbed aboard a private jet and were heading to Bermuda. The federal government said Rajneesh did it to avoid prosecution. When the plane landed to refuel in North Carolina, Rajneesh was arrested. According to those close to Rajneesh, he did not know about the impending arrest and did not know why he was traveling to Bermuda. So I guess some people just came into his office and said, "Hey, we're going to fly to Bermuda. Do you want to come along?" And he thought that would be something good for a change. The government had a weak case against Rajneesh, but because he was facing some serious time, he entered an Alford plea. Therefore, he maintained his innocence while admitting there was enough evidence to convict him. He was convicted of concealing his intent to remain permanently in the United States and encouraging sannyasins to marry in order to stay in the U.S. The terms of his plea deal said he had to leave the U.S. and not come back for at least 5 years. He returned to India in November 1985. He traveled to several countries, apparently with some intent to remain in a few of them for a while, but each country just told him to keep moving. He flew to Switzerland, the UK, Ireland, Spain, Uruguay, and Jamaica. He was invited to leave from those countries. He returned to India in 1986. In 1987, he went back to the original commune in India and worked there until he became ill. He said the U.S. government had poisoned him when he was in prison. In 1989, he changed his name to Osho and accused some of his followers of trying to hurt him with evil magic. On January 19, 1990, Rajneesh would die. He was 58 years old. His death was highly suspicious. People in his inner circle immediately cremated him. Cardiac arrest was recorded as the cause of death, but it was reported that he was never examined by the physician who signed his death certificate. Now moving to my analysis, Rajneesh was similar in many ways to other cult leaders, but in other ways he was different. Let's look at a few of his beliefs. Like many cult leaders, he emphasized sex, his authority, and the end of the world. Several times he predicted that the world would be destroyed. He said that humans were essentially just biological machines, acting out of impulses contained in the unconscious mind, perhaps something he took from Sigmund Freud. He believed that humans needed to transcend this machine status, and sexual liberation was important to reaching that goal. His idea here was that societies repressed sexual behavior, and this led to a lot of problems. So here we see Rajneesh deviates from many other cult leaders. He wanted all of his followers to have sex, but most cult leaders really just focus on their own access to sex. David Koresh is a good example. He was the only male allowed to have sex in his community. Another difference between Rajneesh and other cult leaders would be his attitude toward wealth. Many cult leaders build wealth, like Jim Jones, but they pretend their values are more oriented toward a life of sacrifice. They're not really trying to get rich. It just happens by accident. Rajneesh called himself the rich man's guru. Getting wealthy was part of the plan, and he was not ashamed of it. Many followers gave him all their money, and he gladly took it. As I mentioned, he had 93 Rolls Royces, but his followers wanted him to have one for each day, 365. That was the goal. As I mentioned, Rajneesh is considered to be a cult leader by many. His philosophy was not original, and it was contradictory in many ways. Like so many cult leaders, he simply did a poor job at synthesizing key points from other popular traditions. The result is a jumbled mess of an ideology that is so inconsistent it's difficult to make any sense of it at all. Essentially, Rajneesh was a counterculture advocate who couldn't quite dial in his message. What about his personality? Rajneesh was described as charismatic, hypnotic, non-judgmental. He would radiate energy. That doesn't sound safe. He would awaken hidden possibilities. He was a pretty good comedian, and people believed that he understood them instantly. So people would approach him and have this immediate connection and want to follow him for the rest of their lives. So his personality profile would have high openness to experience, high extroversion, mid-range conscientiousness, mid-range agreeableness, and low neuroticism. Many people believe that Rajneesh was narcissistic, like grandiose, self-centered, envious, and he had fantasies of fame and success. It seems reasonable to believe that he was narcissistic. In a way, Rajneesh was actually a combination of a cult leader and a James Bond villain. He was always surrounded by female followers and demanded sex frequently. He accumulated wealth at a staggering rate, opening a variety of businesses. He flaunted his wealth. His ultimate mission was world domination. He wanted to convert the world to his religion, which of course he would later say was not a religion at all. Many James Bond villains have weapons like bombs, lasers, missiles. Rajneesh had his own religion. In the end, Rajneesh didn't turn out to be as dangerous as somebody like Jim Jones, David Koresh, or Marshall Applewhite, but he did harm many people, and he had the potential to be one of the most devastating cult leaders of all time. Rajneesh really didn't teach much in the way of philosophy, but he did show the world how there will always be gullible people ready to follow a charismatic cult leader. Those are my thoughts on Bhagwan Rajneesh. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be enlightening. Thanks for watching.